there's all kinds of judges in America, and I've been before a lot of them and found them, frankly, not terribly impressive. And there's a reason for that, because everything winds up in court here. America has as many lawyers as the rest of the planet combined. And if you have that many lawyers, an awful lot of them aren't going to be any good, simply by the law of averages, because it's not quite at the stage where it's like doing the night shift at the quickie crap, but it's getting there. You've got an awful lot of lawyers, and that's where they get the judges from, and as a result, there's an awful lot of lousy judges. Here's a story hot off the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, the 9 guys who run the country, the guys who matter. The U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday held that the Constitution required a Pennsylvania Supreme Court justice to recuse himself from a death row post-conviction appeal because the state judge's prior involvement as a prosecutor overseeing the case amounted to significant personal involvement that created an unconstitutional risk of bias. Now, just bear with me on this. This is about the former Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, a guy called Ronald Castile, right? And in the 1980s, so we're now talking 30 years ago, because that's how long it takes in the U.S. courts. 30 years ago, this guy was the district attorney who prosecuted this killer, Terrence Williams. And then, all these years later, he winds up, the guy appeals his conviction, which takes decades here. And so decades later, he winds up in court appealing his conviction, and one of the judges prosecuted him. And he doesn't recuse himself. And to get him to say that he should have recused himself, it has to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which today held that the Constitution requires a Pennsylvania Supreme Court judge to recuse himself because he'd previously been the prosecutor on the case. Do you understand this? The guy's the prosecutor on the case, and then he's the judge on the appeal of the case. And that has to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, where they decide that the Constitution doesn't allow that. Actually, basic common decency doesn't allow that. So if you're a judge and you don't know that you should have recused yourself on that, if you don't know you should have recused yourself from that, how the hell you ever got to be a judge in the first place? If you no longer have a society that knows things like that, then no matter how many bazillions of rules you have, you can never have enough rules to compensate for the lack of just basic moral understanding of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.